congratulations on this film. I just loved it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I was weirdly kind of as a teenager, I got obsessed with the kind of whole American kind of mob world. Made my parents take me to Boston, to Queen Street Market, and
Oh, really?
crazy.
Wow.
But this just felt like something we'd never kind of seen before, and the kind of really internal relationships, particularly with these two characters. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a long time coming, though. This has been a project that's been
Yeah,
around for a while.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of obsessed with the Frank Costello character, even growing up in New York as a young man.
Yeah.
Because as a young film watcher, back in my days in school, I watched the Jimmy Cagney, Warner Brothers movies where it was George Raft or even Humphrey Bogart in the early days. And the gangsters were kind of black and white, tough. And then when I got a little older and I saw in New York, there was a man by the name of Frank Costello, who was not that Jimmy Cagney character, but instead wore very custom-made suits. He was married to a Jewish woman. He lived on Central Park. He went to the best clubs, and he used to go to the Waldorf Astoria for a haircut every day.
Every day?
Every day.
Wow.
And that was Frank Costello. I said, well, this is not the gangster that I saw in the movies and all that. So the character fascinated me. And I worked on it back in the 70s and couldn't come up with an idea. And then Nick Pileggi and I, who were old friends, must have been 10 years ago, we started talking about Costello. We worked it on and off for many, many years. And then Barry Levinson said he wanted to work on it with us, and he came up with the idea of Vito Genovese, the fact that these two men grew up together.
Yeah.
They came from the same area. They were hoods together, tough guys together. And one went off and became a really classy guy, and the other one stayed a really tough gangster and liked it. In fact, in the movie, he says to Costello, I'm a gangster. That's who I am.
Yeah.
And he likes it. So I thought it was interesting, basically, because, and the way Bob is playing it, he's playing basically the same man. One goes off this way, one goes off the other way. And ultimately, it's the conflict between the two of them.
It's like the two peas in a pod that kind of almost kind of go to
and
separate.
one man playing both peas.
Yeah. Your idea for Bob to take on both parts?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Did he jump at the idea? Was it kind of
He
like...
doesn't jump. He paused. What happened was I gave him the script and he called me. He said he really liked it and he liked the Costello. He was fascinated by the Alto Knights, which turned out to be a club he hung around when he was 16.
No.
That's why we use it. It was a gangster hangout. The Alto Knights, it was a club. It was called the Alto Knights. Bob, when he was 16 and 17, he hung around, and basically he saw his friends that also hung around were either going to jail or getting shot.
Wow.
And he decided he wanted to be an actor instead of a gangster. Bob did.
He went the Costello way, kind of.
Because of the Alto Knights.
Yeah.
I said to him, what happened? He says, well, I decided I didn't want to get shot. I didn't want to go to jail. And I became an actor.
Wow.
So the Alto Knights meant a great deal to Bob. That's why we used it as the title. I gave him the script. He said, I like it. Who do you think should play Vito? Because Barry had built up this other character so much. I couldn't think of anybody really who could really, I thought, match Bob as an actor.
Yeah.
For the two of them to be in the same frame together.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why don't you play both parts? And there was this long pause. It wasn't a jumping up and down or a long pause. I said, yeah. You really mean that? I said, yeah. Now I'm convinced myself. And he said, well, let me call Barry.
Yeah.
And he called Barry Levinson. Barry Levinson said, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. And that's how it developed.
I mean, I imagine it would take us a long conversation to talk about how you actually achieved it in terms of making the film, but it's incredible. It's absolutely seamless. And those scenes where they're in together, it's like the idea of Robert De Niro, playing opposite himself is a gift for us film fans.
Yeah, I love the one scene. The first part of the film, you have Frank Costello here, and you have Vito Giannini, and they're separated. But when they finally meet, there's a scene on the street where you see a car pull up.
Yeah.
Frank Costello comes out, talks to a woman in the street.
Yeah.
And while they're talking, another car pulls up, and then Vito Genovese comes out. And they stand there and talking to each other. And then they walk into a restaurant together. And you say, well, how did that do it? Yeah. But we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful, though, that backstory to Bob, with that idea of being able to kind of pour a real experience, of seeing this world and experiencing that world into these characters and that film, that real personal, experience of kind of having lived in that kind of environment for, as an observer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing that he was able to pour that into the film.
Well,
as well.
he's an actor. I mean, and the actor. Probably, if I had to say who is the great American actor of the last 50 years, the films that I've worked with him, and we did The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, and then when we did New York, New York, he was very hesitant about playing the part because he said, if I'm going to do this, I have to really be a good saxophone player.
Yeah.
So we got a man by the name of Georgie Auld who plays the band leader in New York, New York. And Georgie Auld gave Bob lessons on how to play the saxophone. And after they worked for a while, they were in Georgie Auld's apartment, and Georgie Auld's wife was in another room and came in and said, Georgie, that riff you just played was really terrific. That's really great. And it was Bob that played it.
Brilliant.
So that convinced Bob that if he could impress Georgie Auld's wife. And then when we did Raging Bull, he was, he was ready to go into the ring with a real boxer.
Yeah.
So that's who he is, just how he prepares.
Yeah. How do you know, as his friend, but also as a producer, when it's a Bob project, when he's right for the roles? Does it kind of jump off the page? You see him in those roles when you read the script?
Yeah, but some of them, I mean, we've done so many movies, but when I directed him in 2 movies, in the Blacklisting movie, Guilty by Suspicion, I wanted somebody who was very, very successful and then wasn't. And watch how the character, goes from success to failure because of this Hollywood blacklist. So Bob was always on my mind because we had done so many movies together. I said, okay, let me give it. Strange enough, every time I've wanted to get Bob for a movie, he's done it. So we kind of think together. Maybe we've been just doing this so wrong together. We did Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, New York, New York, Raging Bull, a terrific movie that a lot of people haven't seen called True Confessions, with him and Robert Duvall, a terrific movie about the church and the abuses of the church in California. And then we did Goodfellas, and I directed him twice in Night in the City, and then we did The Irishman together.
Yeah.
And here we are, so it's
Someone's
a long,
working.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. Very lucky.
You have the wonderful David Fleming as composing for the Alto Knights, and he has it's always a really interesting job for a composer when there's lots of needle drops, existing music that kind of, flutters throughout the film. And another wonderful thing I love about the film is the use of old footage, whether that's old footage that's been created and made for the film to look like old footage, or whether it is existing real old footage.
Right.
Some of that's band, when we see the old bands playing and things like that. And you have this wonderful soundtrack of music that exists, but then you have David's score on top of that, and they really complement each other. how involved do you get in the music side of things as a producer? Some do, some don't.
Yeah, I've been lucky because the New York song came out of the movie New York, New York. The Rocky theme.
Oh, Bill Conti.
Yeah.
That score.
But, Bill Conti, when we hired him to do the score, had been playing a piano in a bar in Venice, Italy. Yeah, that's what basically.
You found him.
Our film editor had worked on a movie called Bloom & Love with Paul Mazursky, and they had shot in Venice, and he had heard Bill there and knew that Bill was a composer. That's how he hired him. It was his first movie. Bill. But again, that I think Conti's work on Rocky musically did tremendous help to the movie beyond anything I've ever seen in any other movie. Just running up those stairs and that training sequence with the music, and we've emulated ourselves in 5 other Rockies, and even Creed, the success we had with
Ludwig
Creed,
on that,
yeah, which you use just another version of Bill Conti's music,
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think the moments of score in this that I've seen the film once, so trying to kind of capture those moments in my head to talk to you about but it felt really luxurious and really kind of quite almost old school Hollywood in a way, those beautiful luxurious scores, which similarly talking about Rocky, almost with Bill's score, not what you expect for a boxing film, in that it was
so romantic, baby. Yeah.
And similarly, I think David's score with this is really similar in that it's not what you'd expect for a gangster film in a way. It's beautiful.
Yeah. But the difference you see on Goodfellas, Marty used all needle drops.
Yeah.
And used it so effectively.
Yeah, so good.
Some of those musical pieces are just brilliant.
Yeah.
And he did it basically on Raging Bull as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember on Raging Bull, we spent months and months in the mixing room just putting in little music cues that you can't even find somewhere. And we spent a lot of money, a lot of time and effort on the score. And I remember Marty and I took the film to New York to play it, and the sound was terrible. And I ran to the theater, it was like 12 o'clock on a Friday. I ran to the theater owner, I said, the sound is terrible. He said, I just bought 6 new speakers at Radio Shack for $59 each, and it should be great. And I said, wait a minute, we just spent $1 million on mixing this film. But theaters are better than that now. They are, with the Dolby and all that,
But I love how you clearly appreciate how important music is for storytelling.
Yeah, because I've been fortunate enough to have a great success. People remember the song New York, New York more than when I tell them it came from a movie, they look at me like but what happened was, Liza Minnelli obviously made a record of it, and we couldn't get it played. 2 years later, when the film had gone off, nobody knew about the movie anymore, Frank Sinatra heard the song and wanted to record it, but he didn't want to record it unless Liza said okay, just out of respect. She didn't have any rights to, on it. And he called Liza and said, I'd like to record that, but I don't want to. She said, look, nobody's listening to my version of it. Go ahead. And that's what made the song, was Sinatra's version of it.
Wow.
But 2 years later, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Sinatra in the Alto Knights as well. We have a bit of Sinatra in there.
What's that?
We have a bit of Sinatra, Anything Goes, in the Alto Knights.
Yeah.
Are all those tracks, does Nick write those in the script, or is music written into the script?
Most of that came from Bower Levinson.
Yeah. It's great, because it's a real journey of those kind of...
Yeah.
The music's also telling you where we are in time frame as well, when Little Richard comes in.
Yeah, but that's Bowery,
Yeah. You mentioned, it's lovely when you mentioned earlier about those kind of early kind of gangster films. And in the film, in this, we have White Heat. The Cagney film features features on the TV, which is that kind of lovely kind of nod to that.
Well, you know, basically, I grew up with the romance of gangsters because those early Warner Brothers films, the gangsters were really very, very tough young men who basically had very little opportunity to have an education, to do anything really great because they came from immigrant families that were poor. And the only way they can get any success is basically through crime. And they looked at it that way. So there was a romance about them. They became heroic. No matter how bad Jimmy Cagney was in some of those films, you still felt sympathy and you were on his side.
Yeah.
When you look at ultimately, and the best one of all, but that was in Coppola's Godfather, when you think about it, they're going around killing people. But yet, it's a great romance. You think they're all families, they stick together, they care about things that, and when you see the very rich people in the American films, most of them are not very nice, you know. And the gangsters are really, they care about things. Who does Jimmy Cagney care about the most? His mother, right? At his last words, aren't they, about his mom? So how could you really think he's so terrible if he loves his mother more than anything else?
And they're funny a lot of the time as well. They make you laugh. In Alto Knights, there's that scene where they're driving, you know, out of town for
when they're talking about the Mormons?
Oh, that scene is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
How was that all scripted, or was there?
That was Nick wrote that. Yeah, that was scripted. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It feels like just such a kind of riff between them all.
Well, that's because Bob and the actors are so great that it sounds like it's all just happening on the spur of the moment. But all that stuff is, you know, prepared.
Wow.
Yeah.
They make it look
But Bob is very good that way because he's a great ad-libber, as you probably know. And he encourages that kind of off-the-cuff acting. But that requires the actors that are doing it to really know the character and who they are and all that, so they can play together. And then it comes to Barry to get into the editing room and, you know, filter it all out to make it all work. Because when actors ad-lib, not everything is going to be on the nose, obviously.
Yeah.
And shouldn't be.
And when you're working with Bob and he's, as you know, a producer on a project, how involved does he ever get involved in the music side of things? Is it something that interests him?
Yeah, he gets pretty much involved in everything.
Wow.
Yeah, he's, you know, he takes center stage in the film, and he really cares about every aspect of it. You know, he was great when it came to post-production and all that, and seeing different cuts of the film. Oh, he gave notes on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did it work with him playing Frank and Vito? Did you shoot one and then the other, or were you mixing between the two? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the one scene that expresses that when you see them meet for the first time, and basically he had to play both parts, but he had to play it against somebody. So we shot it over 2 days with a locked-in camera.
Yeah.
And he played the one part, but he had to play it against something.
Yeah.
So he had an actor do some of the scene, so he can play Costello against Genovese, and then Genovese against Costello, because he couldn't play it against a blank screen.
Yeah.
So he did it, and then it worked out great. Yeah.
Yeah, it really did.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about a little film a documentary that you released a few years ago called Music Got Me Here? You're an executive producer on it. It's this amazing story about this young kid who had an accident, and it's about music therapy.
Yeah.
And I help a charity here in the UK called Nordhoff and Robbins, which is all about music therapy and helping, you know, all different people.
How do you know about that, brother?
What, the film?
That I was doing that.
Because I saw the film and I just thought it was an amazing story.
Oh, and you knew that I was involved in it?
Yeah, I saw that you were...
Well, I didn't have anything to do with the documentary, but we have a script that I wrote with my writing partner about...
Oh, wow.
Basically based on that documentary.
And it's happening?
Well, we don't have not yet. Not yet. We haven't been able to get it cast yet. But yeah, it's really a fascinating story.
Yeah.
How music can basically cure you. You're very interested in music, I noticed.
How did you become aware of the story? What interested you in the story?
Well, somebody told me about the documentary and arranged for me to see it, and then I just became fascinated. Then I found out that there is like actually a group of performers, mostly musicians, who are very, very involved in creating an awareness that there's a possibility of music being a curing process. So then we basically I co-wrote it. I had a couple of scripts written and I didn't like them, and then I wrote it myself with my writing partner. In fact, Barry is interested in directing it, but we haven't, Barry Levinson, but we haven't been able to cast it yet.
Yeah.
So, but it's really a fine, fine story. Yeah. Pretty much follow the documentary, except we spend a lot more time with the therapist as well.
Yeah.
Because the boy doesn't do very much. It's a therapist that really is unusual.
Yeah, they're special people.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. I'm so excited for that. I really hope that I
hope
get a
you can,
chance. Yeah. We can have another chat about it as well.
Okay,
I hope.
yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last question. You very kindly said you can see how much I love music, and I wondered for you if there's a moment you go back to, you're talking about yourself being a film fan and watching movies. Was there a moment where you kind of recognized or realized how important music was in storytelling? Is there a film and a...
Well, yes, but I'll tell you about it. People say, well, you made so many films. What's your favorite film? And my favorite film is a film I shot here in London that I directed called The Lovely, which is about Cole Porter, a great American composer. And I loved every moment of making that movie because I loved the Cole Porter music. I grew up as a kid from Coney Island in New York, listening to those great bands, the Perry Comos, people who nobody even heard of today, and Bing Crosby, and then later Frank Sinatra. So I fell in love with it. I actually, as a kid, I went to see Frank Sinatra at the Paramount Theater in New York, where he had his great coming out. So, I mean, it's always been a big part of my life. And that's why doing The Lovely, to me, was such a great, great experience, because what could be better? Every 10 minutes you have another Cole Porter song, I mean, I love it. Yeah, to me, that was the ultimate. Yeah. That was the ultimate.
And you got to make it into a film.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so.
Lovely to chat to you. Really,
Thank you.
Really lovely. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.